What was the founding story of Remote First Capital?
Those who don't know me, I have a very long and very confusing CV, but among others I was founding team and CTO at Product Hunt. That I didn't have any reputation in investing. Intentionally pick a niche where I thought there's an upward trend.
People get something wrong about India.
Like what does a typical European misunderstand about India?
Yeah.
It's most likely the fact that they actually don't actively think about India. There's different games, even though it might look like people are playing the same game. And if you're playing the same game, you're most likely doing something wrong. I personally consider, and this is offensive to a lot of VCs, I think of VCs funny. Okay, so I wasn't in consulting.
Today we had Andreas Klinger on the pod. Andreas is a former CTO of Product Hunt, CoinList, head of remote at AngelList, and CTO at OnDeck. He's also an investor via Remote First Capital. He has backed some amazing companies like Remote, Mainstreet, Clubhouse, to name a few. Here are the topics we covered during our conversation: founding story of Remote First Capital, portfolio construction, what kind of companies they invest in, what check sizes, biggest learnings from building Remote First Capital, why venture capital is funny, importance of building a brand to build a successful VC firm, what made him visit India, why is he excited about India, what do people get wrong about India, and who is the outside of work. Now I bring you Andreas.
Awesome. Andreas, so good to have you with me recording the 1947 Rise podcast, and welcome to India.
Thank you very much.
There's a lot to unpack, but I think a good starting point can be, Andreas, what was the founding story of Remote First Capital?
Yeah. So for those who don't know me, I have a very long and very confusing CV, but among others I was founding team and CTO at Product Hunt, and we got acquired by AngelList. And as you know, as somebody who worked at AngelList, if you work at AngelList and you don't pay attention, all of a sudden you have a microfund. Okay, that's like just like a working hazard there, right?
Yeah.
So we started like introducing the first microfunds at AngelList, and I absolutely wanted to also like do a small fund, but I knew that I didn't have any reputation in investing, and B didn't have the network to get in a lot of areas and go to deals. And I strongly believe you want to get into the right deals. It's like you don't want to invest in the third best company who does X. You know what I mean? So what I did with my first fund, Remote First Capital, was to intentionally pick a niche where I thought there's an upward trend due to multiple reasons. And in this niche, become a go-to person that gets actively pulled into good deals. So like that bigger funds, if they do something related, they know about me, they pull me in for credibility, for knowledge, for all these kind of aspects, right? But also where there's enough, I would say, community interest that it's actually even able for me to raise a fund, because I knew I couldn't raise from proper fund of institutionals because I lacked a proper track record. Like I had like 1 or 2 angel investing at that point, you know, like similar to your story back then. So I intentionally picked a small niche where I thought there's a growth potential. I intentionally raised most, and like also mainly from that community, you know. So founders, operators, maybe early believers, investors in global work. And I intentionally set it up in a way that I could do it as a side thing next to my full-time job. So it's like small checks, so 25, 50K checks, with the idea that I also get more actively pulled into deals because I'm known for this topic. And the topic for me back then was like knowledge work in the global sense, with the idea that like we will work more online, we will work more globally with global teams, right? And we will definitely work more digital. So my thinking was like all of this leads to the fact that in some aspect we will work more remotely. This is like hence I called it Remote First Capital. And I basically raised back then, the idea was I wanted to raise 1 million. 1 million due to the very first investments being, I would say, quite successful, became 2.5, and then I closed it down to be fair to my first LPs. And that fund did very, very well. Like
Yeah.
I cannot complain.
Yeah. No, we'll dig deeper into that. Seems like the idea was pretty clear, which is build a brand around something and attract the best founders in that specific niche. And you ended up raising capital from the community. Andreas, did you had one or two mentors, who you reached out to and kind of like they helped you think through how to go about it?
I think in our case, I think it was for you similar. We cheated a bit.
Yeah.
So for me, it was I sparred a lot with Ryan, of Product Hunt. And because we worked at AngelList, a lot of the thinking how to invest obviously came from the leadership there. So like Naval, among others. I don't think this is like replicatable that easily unless you've been in this very specific time moment at AngelList, right? So those were, I would say, people who shaped how I think about investing. And then there's countless of others. I assume it's for you similar. You have like a lot of people you learn like from each person you learn a little bit.
Yeah, gotcha. And fast forward to today, it started off with a $3 million fund. Today it's much bigger. What's the portfolio construction like, and how did you arrive to that portfolio construction?
So I had the lucky coincidence that I started investing in remote work. And for record, it's not like remote work in the sense of I'm looking for the next Zoom. It's like people are going to work online globally.
Yeah.
How does this change countries, governments, societies, families, education, work, like everything, right? So it's not about just the collaboration aspect. It's about like second degree effects, right?
Yeah.
So I was in the lucky situation, which sounds weird if I say it this way, but I had a very specific timing. I basically started the first deployments before COVID came. And then when COVID came, a lot of those companies made absurd revenues. Like some of them did like 10, 20 million ARR in the first year, like just like this.
Yeah.
And also like a lot of interesting, there was like a lot of VC interest into this topic. So like a lot of deals that were very interesting happened, a lot of markups happened and so on.
Yeah.
So the first fund did surprisingly well. And that was just not me being a good investor, it's just like timing for my fund being good, for the rest of the world horrible. That was the first fund. Because the first fund worked so well, it was fairly easy for me to raise a second fund. With the second fund, I wanted to do 5 million. 5 million became instantly, like I had basically the first 5 I had with one email, sending to my LPs, which was surreal to me. Like my first, for the first fund, it was like, I think 150 calls or something, or like maybe more than that, And it was literally grinding like every $1,000, you know what I mean? And with the second fund, I sent out an email, and I had like basically the full allocation. And I was like, what happened? What is this? So I increased it to 8 million. And then I realized that I actually have almost no new faces in the fund. So I did like an additional 500K community allocation, where the condition was that you cannot invest more than 10K. And through this, I got like a lot of new people also in. With the first fund, I was very strict on remote. But I also had the issue that I rejected a lot of companies because they didn't fit into my thesis. So I had a lot of engineering products that are now household names, where I was like, I love you.
Do you mind naming some?
No.
Okay.
And I, also because it's kind of like sad. But I helped them like with introductions and everything, but I said like, sorry, it's not a fit in my thesis, but like this will be amazing, right? And then I'm like, a few weeks later, I'm like, why am I doing this? This is stupid. I shouldn't be, like if I like them, it should be like a little bit broader. So I basically told my LPs that I will broaden it up a bit. And that worked really well. So like I focused more on engineering-centric investments and this additionally. And then when the second fund came, I said like very beginning, this fund will have a certain angle to remote work, but due to the fact that COVID oversaturated the market a little bit on this topic, I will go like way wider, and this was like from very beginning. So the second fund still had like a few investments that were, I would say, global work centric, but there's also like investments in there that have almost nothing to do with the concept of global work, which also makes now the brand a little bit confusing to people. So like this is something where I consider rebranding.
Gotcha. And Andreas, So you've been writing anywhere between 100 to 200K checks?
The second fund is 100 to 200K.
200K.
Yeah. So it's 100K if I invest.
Yeah.
200K from the first investor.
Uh-huh.
I kind of with the second fund, especially with the second half of the second fund,
Yeah.
I focus a lot on first check, first round.
Yeah.
And my premise is basically, if I want to do the first check,
Uh-huh.
I have to be so convinced that I want to invest double the amount of money.
Uh-huh.
And if I'm not comfortable doing the double the amount,
Yeah.
I shouldn't be doing the first check.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. Gotcha. And you're also one of the very few investors that has taken a global approach. You're investing in US, Europe, Asia, India, and Latin America. What's the thesis around that? How did you arrive to that, and how's that going?
The thesis is we have the internet.
Yeah.
That's the thesis, period.
Yeah.
I do not invest in region for region. So like I don't invest in like India for India because I don't understand the Indian market.
Yeah.
But I have no problem in investing a tool from India for the global market if I understand that global market.
Yeah.
So if it's like developer tooling or something, I understand this, then
Yeah.
I'm very happy to invest.
Yeah.
And very frequently, I'm kind of, among my colleagues, I'm kind of known for not even being unaware where some of my founders are based, you know,
Yeah.
because it's not really a criterion for me.
Yeah, gotcha. And talking about fundraising, Andreas, the first one, I think, you mentioned 150 or more emails, and second was like boom, within few emails.
Third one TBD.
Third one TBD. Maybe let's, consider the third fund. So what were the, let's say, 1 to 3 things that you figured works well when raising capital from LPs? Or what? And on the flip side, what was like 1 or 2 things that you did wrong while you were fundraising?
Doing wrong, I had absolute no brand, no experience, no network.
Yeah.
And what works really well is having experience, brand, and network. This is one aspect. And the other aspect is, which I think almost no fund does well, including me, is being very intentional about the game you play. So having a very clear understanding of like how you're building essentially your business. Like what is the kind of you can call it like pipeline. Like how do you find the right deals? How do you get pulled into the right deals and all this kind of stuff? And what is like the structure you do? Like I'm a strong believer that in everything, but especially also in VC, there's different games, even though it might look like people are playing the same game. And if you're playing the same game, you're most likely doing something wrong. So you kind of want to, like, if possible, have your unique game so that you can win your unique game versus trying to be just better than other people's game, in other people's game, you know? And from an LP point of view, this means how systematic are you thinking about the business you're building, the VC firm you're building, which is obviously a different discussion when you're microfund, you know. But you can see there's like a lot of funds that I highly respect that have like a little bit of like a bigger AOM that are very intentional about like everything. Like you can call it like flywheels, like how they are actually working, what kind of business they're doing, how do they get the deals, and how do they get the brand, how do they stay here? You know what I mean? It's obviously a little bit harder with a microfund, but I think if I ever get into the position to consider raising a very large fund, and large fund for me means like above 50 million, that would be the one thing I would be very intentional about. If this makes any sense.
Yeah, gotcha. And Andreas, who was your first believer, man, in Remote First Capital? Who was your first believer or LP?
Somebody from AngelList.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Pimo.
Yeah?
Yeah. It was like the first significant check. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then pretty soon afterwards, Naval actually.
Yeah. And that gave you the confidence and got the ball rolling.
More importantly, with Philips, like Pimo's check, I was able to start investing out of the first closing. So I was able to do my first checks. And the moment you're kind of like, hey, I just invested in this company, and like you can announce that you have a fund and like all this kind of stuff, is actually marketing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At that point,
Yeah.
like people also start like
Yeah.
paying attention, like, hey, wait a minute, is there still space in the fund? And
Yeah.
reach out to you. You had most likely the same experience, right?
Yeah.
And I was lucky that my very first investment was remote.com, you know?
Gotcha.
And that was like first round remote.com.
Yeah. What's the story behind it?
Remote.com?
Yeah.
So for people who don't know, remote.com, what they're basically doing is they do infrastructure for global hiring.
Yeah.
So the initial product is employer of record. So you have another firm that hires for you people in Brazil, and then you pay this firm, so you don't need to actually establish an office there.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or an entity there.
Yeah.
And they additionally have freelance hiring, contractors, and they additionally you can, if you have an entity there because you're big enough, in Brazil for example, you can run your payroll through them.
Yeah.
So like they run it through your entity.
Yeah.
You know, that plus the complexity of stock options and all this kind of other craziness. You know, like how complex
Yeah.
hiring is a business.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what remote.com is
Yeah.
doing. Back then, when I started my first fund, what I did is I mapped out what I believed were the opportunities in this space.
Yeah.
So I had like roughly, I would say 80, 90 ideas for like the shapes of products and businesses and opportunities that exist,
Yeah.
you know. And I actively started looking for them. And from my point of view, the biggest opportunity at that time was global hiring, global payroll. And I talked to multiple companies in that space. And at that time, the majority of companies, I would say almost all of them, were still in the mindset of being an service-driven business.
Yeah.
So it was basically a company that had sub-partner companies somewhere else in each country,
Yeah.
and it was a train of like people handing around papers and doing stuff, right?
Yeah.
And those kind of companies, there existed a bunch of them, and some of them branded themselves like a startup. Some of them had a little bit of software support for this, you know. But that's a business, in my opinion, that's really, really hard to scale because of the complexity,
Yeah.
right? And remote.com was the very first one I talked to that actually thought about this the same way I do, as a problem of management of complexity.
Yeah.
And if you ever have the chance, talk to the CEO and the CEO, two of the smartest thinkers I know when it comes to actually managing complexity.
Yeah.
And so I essentially backed them. Like, I will be honest, like, Joop had no reason to take my money, absolutely none.
Yeah.
Like, the round was done,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and he made space for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was like amazing.
Yeah.
And so I was very lucky with this investment. And
Yeah.
because of that investment, I had like most people didn't know yet that this is like a good investment,
Yeah.
but I at least was like on the right trajectory, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like it was easy for me to do the next closing and everything.
Yeah, gotcha. So kind of like the brand you already had around remote work, remote work, that got you into the deal, and
Yes.
then
And the experience, because Product Hunt was a fully distributed team.
Yeah.
My teams before were like fully or hybrid.
Yeah.
I was my job at AngelList at that point was making AngelList a platform for remote hiring.
Yeah.
So I literally had a title head of remote.
Yeah.
you know?
They wanted you badly.
Yeah. And so I was in a very lucky situation.
Yeah.
And I was also lucky that at that point I had the money from Philip,
Yeah.
and that Joop was like
Yeah.
basically taking a bet on me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Gotcha. And where are they today? They're highly valued now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Multi-billion.
Gotcha. And you were in the very first round of funding.
As far as I know, yes.
Got it. And you've done over 100 deals, Andreas. It's been 4 or 5 years. Man, what's one thing that you know now you wish you knew earlier about investing?
Okay. So I developed for myself a decision framework around decisions. For the original reason to be able to explain to founders why something is not a good deal, or like what they should change to make it a good deal.
Yeah.
You know. And it has 2 models, and like one of the mental models, I call it innovation execution credentials. So it's basically a 3D space, and it's like 3 axes, right?
Yeah.
And one axis is like how new is the thing you're doing, like has been done but similar-ish, but now it's a bit different, or fundamentally new will act the language. Execution, how far along are you? You know, like hasn't even started, barely has a pitch deck, to $1 trillion in revenue. And credentials, like why are you doing this kind of business? You're the wrong person for that, you know, down to the best founder, best investor, like doing their last big thing, you know what I mean? And I realized for myself that because of my background as like product technical person, I'm actually more drawn towards the companies that focus on innovation versus the companies that are just really good, that are really good with execution.
Yeah.
So I'm really bad I take a business and now I copy it for India, but I'm a really, really good business executor because I'm not good in evaluating if you're a good business executor.
Yeah.
I always tell my teams the moment they start to need spreadsheets, I'm no longer useful.
Yeah.
You know, so I realized for myself I'm good on innovation, you know, and depending how this kind of product is and what like the dependencies, there might be a need for credentials. You know, if, for example, if I'm not a full expert for this, like I would like to see some other credentials, or if it's like a product that has been like a little bit done a few times, want to see a little bit more execution, or I try them to reposition the thing so it's like more unique, right? And I usually say they need like to be strong on two of those. So all of that being said, I realized for myself I'm focusing more on innovation-centric deals, you know, and I'm kind of like not a smart investor, but more like a passionate investor. So I'm like, oh shit, I love this, like I want to give you money, you know what I mean? Versus other people, you know, like actually dig into the numbers. And I'm like, okay, I see like a product opportunity in this and all this kind of stuff. And I told you before how I had like this template of like product ideas that I think should be existing, right? And for some of them, I really struggled finding people, you know? So when I actually found the right team, I sometimes had the situation where I invested in the right product by the wrong people, you know what I mean? And then like 3 months later, I found the right people, but I already invested somewhere else, and because I don't try to be competitive investing, I was like kind of blocked doing that. And so in hindsight, like what I'm trying to do now is like I have now several investments where like I would love to invest in this, but I have a bad feeling about the team. You know, they're not good in executing, or they're not making momentum usually. They're not good in rethinking the positioning, and so on and so on. This is like the main learning I have out of my funds.
Gotcha. A bit like you know. USV has been doing this for many years. Union Square Ventures, they have their own framework. This is what they want to see, and they come in and invest. And Andreas, you know, look from outside, it looks all glamorous. Running a fund, building a fund. Man, what's the hardest thing about building a fund?
I'm not sure that, so microfunds, I don't think microfunds are glamorous. I think microfunds are basically like startups. There's like nothing glamorous about this. It's like, it's you either want to do it or not do it. The whole authority that people pull out of being a special role, being like an investor, being press, being politicians, I think this is fake ego. You know, like there's no, there shouldn't be anything glamorous about this, you know? Especially with a microfund, you have so much to prove, and even if you do everything right, the amount of money you multiply, that almost doesn't matter to anybody who's serious. You know what I mean? Like there's no reason to have an ego. You know? A part of that, and you know this, you at some point you just realize that VC is inherently absurd. You know? It's like, I personally consider, and this is offensive to a lot of VCs, I think of VCs funny. You know, and VC inherently is absurd and funny, you know? And just the fact that like so many have like so strong conviction that they intellectualize and then be fundamentally wrong all the time, and their best successes are actually companies that break out of their whole thesis framework, public persona, whatever, you know, that's also really funny. Like how anybody in this industry has an ego after like some time, I wouldn't know. You know what I mean? So nothing glamorous, let's start here, okay? I also don't think it's particularly hard. Investing is easy. Investing good is hard. You know, like it's a bit more hard. You know, but investing itself, like spending money, everybody who ever borrowed a credit card from anybody knows spending money is easy, right? So, two things I personally consider hard. One is general, and one is for me specifically. The general one is being very aware what your game is. And optimizing for that specific wedge. So not like, you know, every investment is a bit different. Like you don't compound on your deal flow, you don't compound on your brand, you don't compound on like how you do things, you know what I mean? So you constantly switch the game, or you're not aware of your own game. You're not aware what's the advantage over other investors, why you should get into a deal, why you should find a deal, all this kind of stuff. figuring out this kind of game
Yeah.
is really hard, because that's essentially the core of your business, right? And you have almost nothing else in VC. There's like no assets, there's nothing. The one thing you have is the game you play and how well this engine works, right? And figuring out for yourself, like, what are your strengths, what are the things you're good at, what is like your uniqueness. I think this is hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes that game might require you, for example, like, I don't like being a public persona.
Yeah.
And I don't like to, like a lot of people go out, have like strong opinions and like sound smart on social media.
Yeah.
This is like, I do not enjoy that, But VC, for example, is in many cases a content play, what I mean?
Yeah.
So obviously I should find an angle in my game to do this as well, somehow, like in my own way, And that, so like I also struggle with this, okay? The second thing where I uniquely struggle with, personally, my background is building is tech product.
Yeah.
When I talk to founders, I feel like back in the days when I was consulting, where you tend to repeat the same kind of advice, so the same kind of problems.
Yeah.
You repeat yourself. It's becoming a little bit like, not mind-numbing, but you notice you repeat yourself.
Yeah.
You become, have you ever been in consulting? I don't know.
Yeah,
but okay. So I wasn't in consulting in the sense of McKinsey, but I was consulting companies around product.
Yeah. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
But you start repeating yourself, and you notice that you get better in the storytelling aspect of it. But necessarily means that it's like more valuable. It's just like you make it sound snappier. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you realize all the stuff you're advising you learned 4 years ago. You no longer know if this is actually tactically correct.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so what a lot of people do at that point is they become more and more abstract. They talk about like high level stuff, or they start repeating stuff they hear in podcasts and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
To me, this is a little bit too boring, and I also enjoy building too much.
Yeah.
So I need to figure out a way that I can combine building and investing.
Yeah.
And that's something I personally struggle with.
Yeah, gotcha. And it seems like that's what you're also working on now. And yeah, you're right. I think it's literally about figure out the game that you want to play and be really good at it. And Navalism is keep refining it until you get so good at it that you're one of the best. So currently we are in Delhi NCR, Gurgaon. You started your trip in India from Mumbai on 1st of February is when you landed. Sorry, I did my creepy. And then you were in Ahmedabad. Now you're here. You're gonna be in Bangalore. You're spending about 2 to 3 weeks. What was your reason for doing a trip to India, and what's the experience been like as of now?
So I wanted to go to India for like quite some time now.
Yeah. And
my more or less like moment was because I had a talk at IIT Bombay. So I was like, let's use this period, And the reason why I wanted to come in the first place is I already have at that point 4 investments in India. And it's like a market where I regularly see good founders coming from. I actually looked this up afterwards. I have in total 18 companies that have Indian founders, but only 4 in India. There's like 2 reasons. Number one is network, and the other one is cultural nuance.
Yeah.
So being able to read between the lines, being able to contextualize what people say.
Yeah.
And especially if you invest as early as I do, this is extremely important. And a good example for this is, imagine you talk to somebody and they constantly look like really pissed at you, and you're like, what am I doing wrong? And then you realize, no,
I didn't do anything.
The guy is Eastern European. He's most likely actually really happy.
Yeah.
He's just like in his default phase, And this is true for every country, has like this own little nuances, So I wanted to understand the culture better, the people better. In this trip, I actually don't have like the idea of like meeting every VC. I actually go by who's people who recommend each other, to understand the people, to understand like how the outliers sound like, how the freaks sound like, how the mad scientists are like, how the good founders, the good investors, like all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But also understand the culture, like understand the different religions, understand the deeper parts of like Hinduism and like this a bit, like read a bit of the texts, go to the temples, like all this kind of stuff, understand what kind of fast food chains are, like what is the reputation of this university for the other students of other universities, you know, what is the beef between A, B, and C, what is the POV on the politicians, like all these kind of little nuances. Is my goal for this trip, to be able, when I meet the next exceptional founder from India, have a certain bullshit filter, to understand, is this person like the little nuances that like are confusing to me, I can read them properly now, you know?
Yeah, gotcha. And then what's been the top takeaways or most interesting thing to you? Like, man, that's very interesting.
So the one thing that surprised me the most is how welcoming everybody is. I wouldn't say that I'm a very famous person or anything. You know, I'm not a very rich person. I'm like just a passionate person. In every town I've been at, some friend of a friend or some friend of mine offered to like host a little meetup so that I get to know like a lot of people. In Mumbai, I had like meetups with like 100 people. You know. Here, like Utsav, like our common friend, you know, he hosted like a dinner with like some of the best people of Delhi, you know. Every person I try to reach out to is like making time. I meet people at 1 a.m., you know what I mean? And they're like, where are you at? Okay, let's do like afterwards, you know. I'm flying out tomorrow. I have like 3 meetings before I fly out, you know what I mean? And some of them actually come to the airport, you know. This is like welcoming, like it's welcoming, but also like hustle to a very specific degree, you know. And this to me was very surprising, like this amount of like energy and hustle, you know. Try in Germany to meet somebody at 1 a.m. for like a business meeting. Good luck, you know. Won't happen. Won't happen. Best case, this person is like drunk. You know, that's the best case scenario. But like for business meeting, impossible. So that's number one. Number two was the amount of dynamism, like dynamic movement. In every city I've been to, no matter which direction you look, you see some large construction. You know what I mean? You cannot drive without seeing one grain, like within like every minute. You know, you have, so for example, Mumbai, or like even here, or like Ahmedabad. Like everywhere there's like bridges produced. There is the universities building like extra parts. There's like new large temples built. There's like business centers built, like within Gurgaon. Like this whole area is like 10, 15 years old. You know what I mean? And this amount of like not only momentum, but also like long-term thinking is to me very inspiring actually. Like the people being comfortable building something where they know it needs 20 years to actually work out. Do you know what I mean? This is to me extremely inspiring. And this is also like why I try to talk to a lot of people who do this. So I talk to like politicians, people who run university programs and all this kind of stuff to understand like how they think about it.
Gotcha. So it's the hustle, you know, the amount of energy, and you know, it's just, you know, building everywhere. And
I mean, for example, like in Delhi, like the new Hanuman temple, like the huge one. It's like I wouldn't even think of this as like a temple. I think of this as like 3-4 temples. This is almost like a world wonder. Like just in scale and size. You know what I mean? Like this country still builds world wonders, but not for like purely commercial interest. Like not a big shopping mall, but like a temple. You know what I mean? To me, this is extremely inspiring.
And Andreas, you know, this is your first time here to India, and you know, people have been talking about India. You have friends who are talking and reading mostly. What do you think, or yourself as well, people get something wrong about India?
So a lot of my previous teammates, but also like some of my employers were like Indian. I used to work 6 years in the Bay Area. It's basically run by Indian at that point, you know. And still, which is very fascinating to me, I think we too are like the last generation where people don't have India top of mind, if this makes any sense. So if you ask me like, what does a typical European person of like, for example, your age, you know, misunderstand about India, it's most likely the fact that they actually don't actively think about India. Do you know what I mean? That it's like not on top of mind. So Europe, for example, has this thing like, what do they need to do to compete with America? You know, and I'm like, at this point, you know, it's like they're missing the game. It's about like competing with China. It's competing with India. You know what I mean? Like at that point, it's no longer like how do you become like how do you stay how do you become number one? Mm-hmm. At that point, it's like how do you not become number 4 or 5? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I think we're like the last generation where this is not like top of mind in planning and politics, global politics, but also like trade, business, all this kind of stuff, you know. Yeah, like this is number one. And also like in the US, the diaspora of Indians in the US, but also Europe is like already so big. Yeah. I think this will be like the first election where political parties have to have an active strategy to for the Indian diaspora, for example, in the US, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. So like, I personally think that Republicans have like a very strong angle mm-hmm. For the Indian diaspora, mm-hmm. surprisingly, in which is confusing but makes sense in a way, you know. If they manage to overcome their own internal biases, you know what I mean? So yeah. My main thing is like you can no longer take it out of the equation.
No, agree. And Andreas, you know, you are here, you're spending time, you're excited about you know, the potential over here, and it seems like you probably want to do more investments in India. Someone you know, in India, either building for India or building from India for the world. How can they reach out to Andreas, and what are, like, you know, let's say top 2-3 things that will make Andreas reopen or take a look at the email seriously?
Twitter DM or email. My email is just first name at lastname.io. Yeah. A few things that are default for every VC, and I will tell a few things that are specific to me. Default to every VC, get through a warm introduction. Like if somebody comes through you to me, you know, I take this way more serious, you know. Versus if I strongly believe that almost like all VCs, public deal flow is actually a lie. Like you have a public form, and most VCs put like some random associate on it that like skims it for 3 seconds. You know, so like warm introductions is number one. Number two, for me specifically, build for the global market and have a global mindset. It does no longer matter if you build developer tools, where the developer tool come from. I invested in developer tools in Brazil, in Europe, in India. It doesn't really matter where they're from. You know what I mean? There might be an argument around like long-term go-to-market and all this kind of stuff. That's a different discussion. Like if your success is your problem, hopefully you find a solution. You know, like get to that point first. So global market, number one. And number two, in my case, innovation-centric. I like investing in stuff that is able to get mind share. A lot of engineers, including me, when they approach problems, or like think about starting a startup, they very frequently pick something that has been done a few times and try to do it better. It's extremely hard to convince a person that has like a box in their brain for something, and has already like 4 or 5 brands in that. Really hard to convince this person to make space for another brand or like be better than one of those brands. It's way easier to convince them that there's a new box where you store stuff, you know, and you can call this positioning, you can call this like USP, whatever, you know. But very frequently it's about like this kind of concept of mindshare. So for me, if the company A, acts internationally, looks internationally, can think internationally, but B, also kind of get new mindshare, that's very interesting for me. Personally, I like a lot of technical problems, developer tooling, open source, commercial open source, like enterprise software done open source, space tech, robotics, VFX, 3D, this kind of stuff. And this is like usually the things I'm most comfortable. And additionally, if it's just like weird, but people are extremely passionate about, like it's weird, unique, but makes sense, and the founder's extremely passionate about this, and that's kind of like a wild card because I've done also like a lot of those investments.
Gotcha. Andreas, switching gears here, what's been making you smile lately?
So, little excursus. This mustache, okay? So far, I got only compliments by men. No woman, none, including my wife. No compliment whatsoever. The only reason why she's okay with this is because of this mustache, you don't see a syndrome I normally have. Like I have a condition that's called RBF, resting bitch face. I always look pissed. You know, if you ask any ex-AngelList person or Product Hunt person, they have been in a Zoom call with me. I was the person that looked annoyed, and they thought they have to like finish the meeting. You know what I mean? Always like resting bitch face. It's a problem, right? The mustache makes me look friendly. Okay. So if you ask me what makes me look smiley, I actually don't smile that much. It's actually the mustache mostly. Okay.
Gotcha. You also had I think in India people think you're one of the Australian players, cricket players.
Yes. I had like a bunch of little kids like storming me and insisting that I look one-to-one like a Australian British cricket player. And I looked the guy up and he looks like Mario, like from Mario Brothers, but on testosterone. You know, and I'm like, okay, fuck, I take it. I'm that guy.
And just what's like that one hack when you can't live life without?
One hack?
Yeah.
You mean productivity hacks?
Could be anything.
The number one number one hack is like make sure your family is good.
Yeah.
Make sure your family is healthy, good. Make sure your spouse is healthy, good. If you have kids, your kids are healthy and good.
Yeah.
Because everything else, if that base doesn't work, everything else is like chaos. You know what I mean? Like it's extremely hard.
Yeah.
A part of that, keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah. That I got access to now.
Like on my blog, if you look up, it's called Q codes. It's basically how I do keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah.
And I honestly think it's like the only reason why I'm able to do like work efficiently alone.
Yeah.
Because so much is automated through it.
Yeah. Got it. And Andreas, if money, attention are not needed anymore, you've made enough money, and let's say you seek attention, you have some attention. What would you work on?
If I would have infinite amount of money, or let's say that I would have a huge amount of money, I think I would do exactly the same thing I would do now. With the one difference, I would do it more intensely. So instead of like going globally and like with Zoom investing, I might do like take a film crew and like visit different hubs and like actually like get to know people, or I might have like a small incubation lab in one city and like actively work with founders I invest in that like for like a month, like let's come here and like build, you know. So I think if I would have, let's say, a few money, I would do the same stuff I do now. I would do it more intense. And unfortunately, and my wife is complaining about this, if I would have absolutely no money, I would do still the same stuff, even though it would make no money. You know what I mean? So I deeply care about technology, innovation. I deeply care. I think of building products as craftsmanship. I think of it as like expression of creativity. You know, I think of like going to market as like solving puzzles. You know, and I think of like people building companies as a way to define themselves, but also like level up everything around them. You know what I mean? Like make sure the family are okay, make sure that their friends have more opportunities, all this kind of stuff. And so if there is no money in this, I think I would do the same stuff and would have like I would like be freelance coding on the side additionally. If I would have more money, I would just like intensify everything.
At a larger scale. I'm happy for you, my friend. It seems like you're in a good place.
For this stuff, I have a lot of stuff, a lot of other issues. I'm very bad with administration. I'm very bad like with all the legality of everything. I have way too much ADHD. You know, I'm crunching through different product ideas to the point that I'm like, dude, like pick one. You know what I mean? So with the fund, I'm lucky. But you know how VC works. You know. Like you don't know if it's actually successful until you have to raise your next fund, and if it's really successful, like years later. You know what I mean? Like TVPI paper markups doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? So currently I feel lucky. Maybe in 8 months, 12 months, when I have to raise my next fund, I feel like a complete loser. Who knows? You know. Currently, I have like a little bit of a high. I meet like a lot of amazing people like you. You know, we have like been working together, but like I think we've maybe met once. I don't know if we even met. You know?
No, first time.
First time. You see, but we work together, right? And like so, I can do this like all over India right now. This is like amazing. But the big question to me is like, how will my next year look like? Do I like focus more on the fund and not, you know?
And Andreas, we know you, you know, as a hardcore techie, builder, investor. Man, what do your friends know you for? Who are you outside of work?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of, like, I like solving problems on a very high level. I'm really bad, like, if it's about, for example, okay, now let's, like, find the right XYZ and, like, research 5 hours.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm the work person.
Yeah.
But, like, you have an issue, like, brainstorming about it, like, in my friend group, the first person to do this. I care a lot about my family.
Yeah.
I care a lot about making food.
Yeah.
This is like why I'm fat.
Yeah.
You know, and I think like most friends of mine would describe me as a little bit obsessive and passionate.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But it's a good question. I should ask this my friends what they would describe me as. I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah. No, definitely. And your wife is lucky. Seems like you're, you know, as you said, you enjoy cooking and must be making some very good food, delicious food.
Yes, but the problem is I cook no meat, no fish.
Yeah.
I mean, I cook steak for her.
Yeah.
But it's like when if I cook for us both, it's always no meat, no fish.
Yeah.
So she's a little bit sick of that.
Got it. And then, but India must have been amazing for you in that sense, being a vegetarian.
So I don't eat meat or fish, which is a big problem in India.
Yeah.
Because there's way too much good food to choose from.
Yeah.
And I legit, and this is no joke, I think I gained like by now 3 kilos in like a week.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to survive the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like seriously.
Well, you'll be in Bangalore soon. Yeah. You're gonna have tons of dosas and that south, you know, the food from south. Andreas, man, thank you so much for really, you know, coming on the pod and just walking us, you know, through your journey of building the fund, your experience in India, and then the stuff around, you know, even outside of work. Thank you.
Likewise, and thank you for inviting me. It's like extremely inspiring how passionate you are about the topic. You know, like what you're trying to do with your fund. Like it feels like you're not trying to just invest. You're trying to tell a story. Does it make sense? You're trying to tell a story about India to the world. You know, like also like to India itself.
Yeah.
So like, you know, like built in India but with pride. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's like really inspiring to see. So like, thank you for having me.